The months since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, voters responded by upholding abortion rights in every state that put it on the ballot. Now, anti-abortion activists are trying a new tactic for upcoming ballots, moving the goalposts or avoiding the voters altogether. The New York Times reports Republican-controlled legislatures and anti-abortion groups are trying to stay one step ahead by making it harder to pass the measures or to get them on the ballot at all. The first state to test this new strategy is Ohio, a coalition of abortion rights groups pushing to get a vote on a constitutional amendment in November that would stop the state from being able to ban abortion before 24 weeks.
Why? I'll tell you why. Because 65% of Americans believe abortion should be legal in most or all cases, and that means it would very likely pass in Ohio. And they just need a simple majority. But as the New York Times writes, Mika, Republicans in the state legislature are advancing a ballot amendment on their own that would raise the percentage of votes required to pass future measures to a 60% supermajority because they know they are in the minority.
Similar efforts to block citizen votes are happening in at least 5 other states. It's hard not to get really angry about this because, as we all know, as Americans know, and this is an issue, you know, I disagree a little bit. I think Trump's lies still fester among the population, and we can talk about that another time. But this story has cut through the American culture, American society, because women understand what they need for their health care. They need mifepristone. They need access to abortion. And it's not just, as I said, one late-term pregnancy by somebody who doesn't feel like having a baby. That's not what it's about. We all know this. We all know this. We all know there are women right now who will have to carry to term dead fetuses because they cannot get a termination.
They can't get basic medical.
A 67-year-old white man bachelor decides that for her.
Yeah.
And her family.
You know, this really follows up on what I said earlier this morning about the fact, Ed Luce, that Republicans know they've lost America. 7 of the 8 last presidential campaigns, they lost the popular vote. They were in the minority. You look at Madeleine Albright's funeral, what do you see there? You see candidates there, and you take Al Gore as well, and, you know, they won in 2000. Well, they won in 92. Bill Clinton won the popular vote in 92. In 96, Al Gore won the popular vote in 2000. Barack Obama won the popular vote in 2008. Barack Obama won the popular vote in 2012. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016. Joe Biden won the popular vote in 2020. And speaking of Bill Clinton, I interviewed him for my special tonight, but I asked him about abortion, and he said, well, you put this up to the voters, so they can't say that it's extremist. Put it up for the voters. And he talked about in 2000 when George W. Bush easily won Colorado, but they had a pro-choice referendum on the ballot, which easily won in Colorado. You look at the numbers on Roe v. Wade. You look at the numbers on guns, on red flag laws, on universal background checks. You just put those 3 referendum up in 50 states, they would pass in 45 of them comfortably. So Republicans know this. They know they lose in a Democratic election. That's why they're so anti-democratic in so many ways. And now they're trying to stop the one person, one vote reality that this country was supposed to be built on, Ed. And here's a perfect example of it. They know in Ohio, they put this up for a referendum, they lose, just like Kansas. And yet they now are working as hard as they can to subvert the will of people in Ohio.
So my theory, sort of grand theory of Republican politics, is that the big funders, the Koch brothers, now the Koch brother, Ken Griffin, Singer, people like that, the really big donors are not in this for culture at all. They're not really interested in those issues. They're in this for deregulation and low taxes. But those things don't win elections. Ultra-libertarian positions don't win elections. They just don't poll well with the average voter. The average voter is kind of center-left on economics. You know, they want Medicare, they want Medicaid, they would like family leave and sick leave and paid vacation and stuff. That polls pretty well. Healthcare, public healthcare polls pretty well. But that's not what the Kochs and the Ken Griffins want. So the way they get the support of blue-collar voters, of particularly white blue-collar voters, is to rile them up on the culture wars. And I think that this strategy being taken to its most absurd, extreme conclusion, because ultimately it's a failing strategy, but it hasn't always failed. Look at where the tax rates are. Look at where the estate tax kicks in. It's not failed from the big donor perspective. It's not failed them yet. I think, though, you're right. This is on a hiding to nothing. You cannot go against people's views on abortion like this and expect to win elections.
Ed Maragay here from the New York Times. I'm curious, do you think there is an opportunity for the Democrats to actually point this out? I mean, it has not been since the Trump tax cuts where you saw, billionaires getting even richer, buying bigger yachts, doubling the size of their yachts in Nantucket. I saw that with my own eyes the summer after. I mean, is there an opportunity there for the Democrats, or what is the winning Democratic response or strategy to what you're describing? And that dynamic is very real. You've got donors who are kind of whispering in Mitch McConnell's ear what they really want, and then feeding red meat to the Republican base.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I mean, I think the way for them to play this is to sort of stick to principles in terms of, fighting racism and fighting homophobia and misogyny, and of course defending women's right to choose and so forth. These are both essential on principle grounds, but also, popular, I think, with the majority of Americans. But also not to fall into the trap of the DeSantises and the Trumps of becoming sort of caricatures of themselves in terms of getting stuck on debates about the trans issues. They should have their position, which is to defend trans rights, but to treat this as a sort of the overwhelmingly important issue of our time is going to put people off. So they have to thread a needle there that shows support for the ordinary people of America, whatever color and whatever gender and whatever orientation they are, but talk about issues that most Americans consider to be everyday issues.
Matt Lewis, you're one of the keenest observers of the Republican Party. I want to get your take there on how abortion is playing out with the backdrop of this effort in the states. But as we've been discussing, it's so out of step with where the American public is writ large. Is this just going to doom Republicans at the ballot box in national elections in 2024 and going forward?
So this is one of those cases where I have my conservative hat and my political analyst hat, and they're a little bit different. I am pro-life, and I actually would push back a little bit on the conversation today, which is to say, I do believe that there is a ton of weirdness happening in the Republican Party. Obviously, like the American right today is decadent and depraved. I do believe that the pro-life cause, there are a lot of honorable people out there, good, decent people who care deeply about the life of the unborn, and they want to have a culture of life. And I believe that this should be something that transcends just the unborn. It should be part of that, but also compassion for all sorts of people. The immigrant, the widow. How about people who don't want to be shot when they open or knock on a door? All of these things are part of a culture of life. And so I think that there are people who are legitimate conservatives who are willing to lose elections if it means that they've accomplished this goal that frankly took us 50 years to get to. And I think there's something noble in that. Having said that, from a political standpoint, this is incredibly dangerous right now for the Republican Party for a couple reasons. One, I think there's just a predicted backlash that is going to come. You know, sometimes in politics, winning is losing, losing is winning. For a long time, I think the pro-life forces had the advantage politically, right? Because we felt like we lost in 1973. We felt like Roe was not a good decision. And I think that gave the pro-life side the energy and the ground troops, quite frankly. And now that has changed. So I think the energy is on the other side. The other problem, I think, is that because the Republican Party and the right has become so deranged and weird, just plain weird, that it's hard to, it's really conflated these messages, right? And so it's hard to be a pro-life conservative in a party with Donald Trump, who has sex with porn stars and pays off porn stars, and with Herschel Walker, who, fathered all of these out of wedlock children. And then you have someone like Ron DeSantis. And again, now I'll put my political consultant, political hat on. The 15-week ban that Florida had was most pro-lifers would have applauded that a few years ago. That would have been seen as a big win, a 15-week ban. And I think that was probably a mainstream position that would have been very politically popular, or at least defensible. Moving to 6 weeks, forget what I said about my principles. From a Machiavellian political standpoint, I think that what is going to happen is, if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, the Democrats will destroy him because A, he's Donald Trump, B, he's a threat to liberal democracy. And now, if Ron DeSantis manages to become the nominee, it's going to be all about abortion, and they're going to have a pretty good argument against him.